Welcome everybody. We're going to do Matthew again, and we're looking at Sermon on the Mount and see if I can make it any bigger. It's not going to come up. Okay, let's do that. Let's see if there is a little bigger. So we have Matthew 33 to 37. We've been working our way through these passages that you have heard it said, but I say to you. So there are, anybody remember how many passages there are that start off with that section? It's supposed to be 6 of them. I think this one's number 4, if I remember right. So we're getting through it and get my pictures out of the way. So what's up with this that you have heard it said, but Jesus says that it's going to be different than what you thought it was? Are any of these you have heard it said passages make it easier to be a follower of Jesus? You have heard that it said, we talked about anger.
I don't think so. In my view, it makes it more complex, and in my view, it makes it more difficult. Or at least I don't measure up to the majority of it.
Harder to measure up, and yeah, so we couldn't have adultery, even that one was hard enough, and now you can't even look at a woman without getting in trouble. I wonder if this is a flunk out class, if Jesus is trying to flunk everybody and make us like look bad or something, because it's not easy.
You know, I thought that was a fascinating question. I've never ever thought about it like that, to weed out would-be followers. It's more like, it's just, in my mind, it's like he's making it real. He's not letting you get off with any kind of excuse. There is no messing around. And you know, really it's making an excuse. Oh, well, that doesn't apply to me, or I never did that. And it's like he's saying all of this applies very directly to you, so pay attention.
Yeah, I like that version better than what I wrote. Because I can say, well, I don't have a brother, so it doesn't bother me if I say, you fool, or whatever. Yeah. So, yeah, so now we're trying to talk about honesty and oath taking. So, we have the New International Version. Let's see. Who has a version that someone want to version? We have this one here. You have another version you want to read? Matthew 5.
I think we got to hear Larry's version. He's got a cool version.
Yeah, we're fans of Larry's version.
All right, the Message. And don't say anything you don't mean. This counsel is embedded deep in our traditions. You only make things worse when you lay down a smokescreen of pious talk, saying, I'll pray for you, and never doing it, or saying, God be with you, and not meaning it. You don't make your words true by embellishing them with religious lace. In making your speech sound more religious, it becomes less true. Just say yes and no. When you manipulate words to get your own way, you go wrong.
Okay. That's quite different than, he's taken some liberties there.
Right, doesn't mention oath at all.
Yeah, or swearing. I mean, oath, and I'm not sure what the Greek says, but some of the commentaries were saying swearing, as in taking the Lord's name in vain or something, and also swearing an oath. Those are two different things, but he might have been talking about both of them. We have this book that I've been using. I can't see my photo here. Text in Transit. So it talks about the text when it was first written by Jesus. Followers would have been hearing it, then how the early brethren were hearing it, and then how modern times we might be interpreting it the same scripture. So this was kind of an interesting read from that. Apparently, most verbal agreements were sealed with an oath. An oath or vow made to the Lord was, of course, totally binding. So that would have been in Jewish times. You didn't have any agreement unless you sealed it with an oath. So there are all kinds of different oaths, evidently. I've heard people say, I swear on my sister's grave. Have you heard that one?
Yep.
I don't know if that's, is that cultural, or is that pretty widespread in our culture? I swear on my father's grave. I swear on my mother's grave.
Never heard it.
Anybody else heard it besides Fred and me? No? Okay, well.
It must be a Missouri thing.
Well, there you go.
I guess so. I don't know. But you wouldn't just say it. You'd have to, mean that it's, you really meant it, because it wouldn't be good enough if you just said it. You had to really say that. So, but oaths taken on other things apparently were less certain. So Jesus points out that nothing escapes the involvement of God. Anything in heaven is God's, because that is the location of the court of God. So you can't swear by heaven or earth or anything on the earth, because God's already been in charge of all of that. So, and then Jesus even goes to add two more. You can't swear on the future or the New Jerusalem, and you can't swear by your own head. Well, I swear by my head that may my hair turn gray if what I'm telling you is wrong. Whoops, my hair turned gray, so maybe that's not a good example. So you are trying to make people believe you, because, why would they believe you if you didn't swear with an oath? So, so that was the times that they were living in. And Jesus said, you need to stop that. Now, why would Jesus say you need to stop that?
I would suspect that we weren't all that great at being able to be good for our word when we thought we were.
So maybe your word wasn't as good as you thought it was. So what the brethren then, so this is what the Jewish people were saying: don't use those, don't use those extra safety guards to say that you're telling the truth. The brethren would say, you need to tell the truth all the time. You need to be honest all the time. And there's a saying in the brethren that said, your word is as good as your bond. Has anybody heard that?
Yes.
So what does that mean anyway? Your word is as good as your bond. Is that something you use in real estate, Kathy?
Not that saying, no.
Have you ever heard it?
No.
Okay. Well, what does it mean anyway?
Sometimes you have to have a bond for whoever's counting money and stuff. In case you run off with the money, they somehow can get, like an insurance. So maybe that's it. If you're used to telling the truth, they don't need to get a bond to back you up.
So you would be honest, and you wouldn't need to have a bond. And a bond must be a legally binding document. I'm assuming of some sort, a bond.
I think I've seen that for church treasures or something about bonds that Elgin takes care of, or I don't know. There was something I read one time.
Okay, that's
I think
good.
people are bonded for fiduciary duties. So it's like an insurance, right? If someone runs off with the money, they're bonded, so it's covered.
Yeah. So
Oh, yeah.
it's protected, right? So I said that in court one time, and the judge just eyes popped out. It's like, oh boy, what did I just say? So I had to be a character witness, and so I said that about someone. Their word is as good as their bond, and the judge just looked up like I'd said something really kind of out of this world. So this Bible is telling us. So here we have the literal opportunity again. Jesus says to just say that your yes be yes and your no be no. I guess that's in. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. So that puts us in a predicament. Have you ever had to swear in, be sworn in a court of law? Anybody been to court? Lyle has.
Many, many times.
Fred, Larry. Dave, have you ever been sworn in?
What
Many,
I had said swear or affirm on it, I think.
Right. So jury duty, you'd have to be sworn in. And so the brethren then were trying to figure out what to do. And so they've been teaching all the generations since 1700 what Vivian just said. What do you do if you're asked to swear in, Vivian? What's the alternative?
Affirm.
Mm-hmm.
So the last time this happened to me, I was a character witness. I guess I get to be character witness in Kansas. And so usually I try to say to the lawyer that I'm working with that I will choose not to swear, but I will affirm. Well, this time I didn't get a chance to do that. And the judge was from a whole bunch of Mennonite communities, and he just automatically said, would you swear or affirm that what you, so he didn't even give me a chance to say, I can't swear, but he already threw it in there because so many Mennonites were in that part of Kansas that he already knew that he should add that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So why would you affirm then instead of swear?
We'll probably try to deal with this issue, but it's I had a fellow that was working for me, and he would always, when he was called into court, he would affirm instead of swearing, but it didn't bother him to swear or not tell the truth when he wasn't in court. And so I thought that was kind of interesting, and we eventually parted company, but I just thought it was interesting that he would not swear an oath in court. He would only affirm, but he was a lot looser when he was not in the courtroom.
He maybe didn't read the whole text. Maybe he needs to go back and beef and brush up on some of those other sentences in that passage. So we've been taught this in our tradition, that this is one of the ways that we can make our faith be alive and walking with us every day. It doesn't just happen. We just don't tell the truth when we go into the courtroom. We're going to say, well, just a minute now, my word is as doesn't need to be sworn in because it's going to be true no matter whether you swear me in or not. So I was reading in, we have this book, the Brethren Encyclopedia. It's 2 volumes thick, and I was looking at oath swearing, I think, and I ran across this this passage about Martin Brumbaugh. Anybody know more about Martin Brumbaugh? He was during in Pennsylvania. He was an educator, and then he ran for governor, and he won. So he was one of the only Church of the Brethren people who went into politics and made it his career. But when it came time to swear an oath, he had a dilemma. What was he going to do in front of all that swearing in ceremony? So he did not take the oath of office. Rather, he affirmed his dedication to perform his duties. He also is famous for saying that there's no force in religion. I think he was the one who helped coin that phrase for the brethren, no force in religion. And he was notable for not forcing children to go into child labor. He passed child labor laws in the state of Pennsylvania, helped do that. So, Vicki, do you know anything more about Martin Brumbaugh and is he your cousin or something? Anybody related?
He could be. I'm not going to go down that road. I don't know anything, and I apologize for jumping out, but I got a phone call from my brother that I really wanted to take.
No worries, no worries.
I was just curious. I mean, you talked about him and his, and I can tell you nothing about that, but I remember Julia Farringer, long-time faithful member, talking about being serving on a jury and doing the I affirm as opposed to I swear on the Bible kind of thing. And and it really threw at least one lawyer into a loop, like, what? And the judge got it, and I think the other lawyer understood, but yeah, it's a pretty, I don't know, archaic is the right word, but yeah, it's an odd.
So she threw a monkey in the works in the wrench there.
Took some people by surprise.
Yeah. So we've been talking about this since early Brethren. The Brethren came to the United States in 1720s, and by 1780s, they were saying Christ forbids his followers to swear oaths and go to war. And the Brethren have known for their truthfulness and their honor for their word. I got that twice. Oops. I think I typed that in twice. Whoop, here we go here. So there we go. So it was formerly said that a brother's word was as good as his bond. There's even a song that we have by one of the Brethren song writers. It's Brother Silas, when he pulled up in his wagon load of corn or oats or whatever, he didn't cheat and say that the wagon was full when it wasn't. And so he'd say, he's a full measure man. Whatever he says, let old Silas go on, because nobody, if you checked him, it would just be wasting your time, because if he said his wagon was full, then his wagon was full. So that's one of the stories that we carry with us. So I was wondering about this piece down here, peculiar people. Sometimes brethren have been called peculiar people. And Julia, Vicki told the story about a member of the church in Littleton, Julia Farringer, who's passed away. Is that something anybody else has heard? I mean, her behavior was kind of peculiar in the courtroom. People were looking at her and going, what did she just do? And why did she do that? Has anybody heard this phrase, peculiar people? So is that a positive thing?
Just means they behave a little different than some people.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Some brethren are not only peculiar, they're weird.
I don't know, in my mind, I guess it has a little bit of a negative connotation. I don't know that it should, but when I hear that somebody is peculiar, um, um, that means that they don't, in my mind, they don't really fit in with the rest of society very well.
So the question is that a good thing or a bad thing to not fit in with the rest of society?
I don't know.
Where's my book? I've been reading this book. I can't see my screen here. Who Will Be a Witness by Drew Hart, and he's talking about Jesus has kind of gotten sanitized, and he's not as radical as what the Jesus of the day, where he was saying things that would have popped your eyeballs out, um, like Mary's Magnificat. You know, the rich will be sent away, and the poor will be fed, and people were hearing things that were all upside down, and it wasn't it wasn't normal. Um, Jesus was saying all these things. You have heard it said, but I say to you that it's going to be like this. You've messed it up. You've got it wrong. So he's saying that being peculiar would be being more like Jesus. If Jesus were hanging around today, would he be hanging out in the safe SOS, what are those SOS or safe outdoor spaces we have in Denver now, where you're, instead of being homeless, they're putting people in a tent in a church parking lot, safe outdoor spaces. Would Jesus be hanging out in one of those, or would he be in my a house on my street with a nice warm heater and air conditioning and all the other amenities of the day?
Well, I think of the peculiar sense as that way of being that's in the world but not of the world. I'm here, but I'm a little different. And I get, you know, if I talk now about somebody being peculiar, it's probably a bit of a pejorative. But when I was growing up and heard peculiar people, it was there's a place where it's almost like a badge of honor, because you're fitting in with this ancient heritage of brethren and the uniqueness. And there's a place where you become unique. You wear a funny hairstyle so people notice you and pay attention to you. So there's that kind of a tension. But I always oftentimes I understood peculiar people as addressing the way people dressed, because my grandfather, for example, we would always joke, well, no point in getting him a tie for Christmas, because he never ever wore a tie, ever. He had that high straight collar. And so there's a kind of brethren garb, the garb, and for how people would dress, men and women, but it was tended towards men, I think. So there's that, but it's a way of standing. I don't know if it is a way of standing out, and that makes you a subject and a target for ridicule and bullying, and at the very least being made fun of. But it's also a kind of a statement of faith about who I am in the culture and what you can expect. My yes means yes and my no means no. So that was long.
So if I'm wearing this garb, if I'm wearing something, then my behavior better shape up to match what my outward appearance is, right?
So a
So
definition in Webster Dictionary says peculiar people, God's own chosen people, used by various Christians to emphasize their nonconformity to the world.
ah,
So that's probably a good thing.
so we're not the only ones. Doggone it.
Yeah.
various
So,
ways.
so if I'm understanding you right, Kathy, then that's used as a religious term? I
Well,
thought it was broader
under,
than that.
that's what Merriam-Webster said.
Huh, wow.
So what about a hijab, those veils that Muslim women wear? Would they ever be called peculiar?
I would. You know, and the, you know, the older brethren and Mennonite and Amish attire. Um, I mean, it stands out, and but the sense that I get or have with it is that folks that dress that way, there's a certain amount of naivete that goes with that. But I mean, that's not necessarily true, but that's just kind of what that's my bias, my prejudice, I guess.
Yeah. So they're not world smart. They're not they're not of the world. They're kind of naive, perhaps.
Yeah, not up to not up to date in their thought processes.
So we put a lot of weight on how people appear. I'm thinking of people with purple spiked hair and green and orange, and um, I would call that peculiar. And it does make me have a certain um, tendency to think, well, this person, you know, would want to behave in a certain way, not go to church, not be would be a partier, would drink or have, you know, all kinds of partying types of behavior. That may not be true at all.
Well, I think there's something here about cultural standards. I mean, today truth telling, if we're talking about swearing and oath, truth telling's pretty rare commodity in our culture. I mean, whether a lot of ways you could go with that. Obviously, our political life. I don't think of advertising as being particularly truth telling. So there are cultural things that are part of that. And thinking about, I was thinking about this earlier. When you mentioned about adultery, and it seems like Jesus's, I mean, the culture he's responding to are mostly males, right? I mean, they're the ones who are in charge, and so holding them to a higher standard is probably, it's important. It's important in that. So in terms of the context, right? And so, and women wearing, I mean, brethren women used to wear the prayer covering, right? And there's certainly verses about that in terms of, why you would do that, modesty. It's interesting, and it's the last thing I want to say. Interesting with the hijab, you're talking about maybe naivete. I mean, part of it is obviously the culture, and then the past, and there are injunctions about that in the Quran, but it's all, there are modern Muslim women who say, this really frees me from being seen as a sexual object. In other words, I'm not having to deal with the leering looks and all that, and so in other words, it's almost an empowerment kind of thing, which I think is very, very interesting.
Yeah, and you've kind of brought us down to the nitty gritty. How important is honesty? This is text in transit. We started out with Jesus, and we went to the early brethren. Now we're talking about current times. How important is it to be have this as a value? Honesty is and trustworthiness is a value that you cling to or you hold to. How important is that in our life as we walk today?
I think it's incredibly important, but it feels to me like we've moved away from that to some degree, and that We're more interested in the legalities of it than it is than the spirit of it.
So say more. What are you thinking about the legalities versus spirit of it?
Well, just as long as long as what I say or what I sign off on isn't technically wrong, I can be wrong in the spirit of it and the intent, as long as I'm technically correct. I'm
Right.
not phrasing that very well, but some of the rest of you, maybe you can help define that for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember and the Iran-Contra deal, um, whatever that colonel, what's his name, said, I knew it was immoral, but I didn't know it was illegal.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Fred. I know you made sense for me. What my response to let your yes be yes and your no be no, where I keep finding myself all the time going so frequently is, well, it's complex. It's very hard for me oftentimes to say yes. I mean, it's got to be really simple for me to go yes or no. I go, well, it could be a little bit of this or it could be a little bit of that. And then where does paradox play out? I'm a big fan of paradox, and that is not yes and no. So maybe I've confounded or conflated the whole thing. But the sense of trustworthiness and integrity, it seems to me, has just gone by the by. And we don't care about that so much, or we certainly don't hold to it. And that's a great loss for any number of things, whether it's our democracy or our interpersonal relationships or our workplace or clients or anybody. I mean, the sense of being honest and forthright and reliable in your word. And we've got excuses and we got workarounds and we got all kinds of ways to do but. So we're in a bad way when we lose honesty and trustworthiness, I think.
But I'm not sure it's even in our society today, it's not even seen as good business.
Oh.
If you go to buy a used car or trade your car in, they're not going to tell you these are the things that are wrong with this particular model. Or if you trade your car in, how many people actually go in and say, well, I'm trading it in because it's starting to nickel and dime me to death, or whatever. And we should.
We keep that under our hat.
Yeah. And instead, it's just kind of like it's not right.
It affects. You're muted, Vicki.
The end justifies the means seems to be the way we are operating.
That can be very dangerous, right? So go ahead.
I worked at a retirement home in Illinois where we had a supply clerk that lied all the time, and we'd ask her to purchase something and she would come up with some excuse why she didn't have it. And after a while, you just lost any faith that she was going to tell you anything truthful. So it's a really slippery slope once you start that.
Yeah, I was thinking, how does it affect who you want to do business with? I learned in mediation courses that the most valuable thing that you have as as a mediator is your trustworthiness and your reputation. And if you say one thing to one party and tell the other party a different version, then you're not going to be trusted, and you're not going to be hired as you're not going to be able to help anybody in their decisions if you can't be trusted. So who do you do business with?
One of the things that this obviously, well, this is a confession, I guess. We need to be more Catholic or something, but one of the things that I've struggled with in terms of honesty has been when you're struggling with issues around, like I had the one time, and it still bothers me. I had a professor tell me one time that you know when you didn't do the right thing because you keep replaying the tape in your head. And this is one of the tapes that I'm replaying in my head. Had an attorney call me, and he was in the process of putting together a lawsuit against one of my friends. And the friend had shared information with me, and the attorney asked me if that information had been shared so he could use me as a witness in court against my friend. And I didn't tell the truth, and I probably should have, but I didn't want to get my friend in trouble. And it was just one of those things where the tape keeps replaying. And I was trying to do it because I cared about my friend, and maybe it was because I cared about me, and I didn't want to suffer the consequences of sitting in a courtroom and going through that process and doing something I didn't feel good about.
Right. And I don't know, I can't quite say that in Nazi Germany you should always say, yes, I'm hiding Jews in my attic. It's not always such an easy thing to say your yes is your yes without any exceptions.
Well, that and around issues around slavery and who was hiding in the barn and that kind of thing. I don't know how folks handled that. Fred, confession is good for the soul, so we can absolve you or help you make peace.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, it's tough. It is complicated. And what do you do? And, does that make a big difference in the world? It obviously made a difference in your own head, your own head and heart. And that's just hard stuff. And everybody gets that, is confronted with that.
Well, I did a real quick look. That word peculiar, it tends to be in older translations rather than newer ones. Like it's King James for sure. Newer translations seem to do other things, but I don't know if this may help, but there's one passage, it's in Titus 2:14 that says, purify unto himself a peculiar people, and then says zealous of good works. So, being zealous of good works is one of the characteristics of, being that way, which seems, and I think these examples we're talking about, I mean, there's some things we know are good, and then there are some things we just have to kind of work at and make our best, like Fred, you make your best decision at the time. And then maybe we figure out, well, maybe that wasn't so good. And you mentioned Nazi Germany and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who, lived in that time and then did things that he wasn't always sure were the right things. But, I mean, he agonized over the decisions he made. He wasn't going to tell people he had Jews in his attic, for example. I mean, and he really wrestled with some of those kinds of issues.
So I think the hard part is when there's competing goods. So there's honesty as one good, and preserving human life, you know, if loyalty to friendship, Fred, and honesty, you know, those are two goods, and it's tears at your heart to know how to resolve those, how to solve that. And maybe there is not a yes or no answer for some of those when there's both things are valuable. All things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. That's one of the verses from Paul that we talked about earlier. That might help us figure out some of, you know, we can carry that with us when we get in a tough bind also. Well, I'm gonna close us out a little bit early. Anybody have any last parting words you want to share?
Just have a great holiday season and stay healthy, folks.
Stay home.
Same to you.
Stay healthy. Eat your dinner. Eat your TV dinners for Christmas. I don't know what we're gonna do. Seems like a crazy year, but I've been blessed to have all of the journey with you all. So thank you for being a part of this, and we'll see you in January.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay,
you.
stay well.
And
Thanks.
wish you well on your next endeavor. So
Oh,
prayers for that.
thanks.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Let me
See you all.
Bye-bye.
Merry
Goodbye.
Christmas.
Bye.
see if I can stop share. There we go.